Hello, my name is Carolyn Hasselman, and I will now demonstrate a few ways you can use Westlaw's CoCounsel and Lexis's Protege, the generative AI tools from Westlaw and Lexis, to conduct legal research. Using CoCounsel and Protege should be just an initial step in your research process. Think of these tools as another secondary source to consult. Generative AI should supplement your research and not replace it. Like other traditional secondary sources, Protege and CoCounsel can provide basic information on your topic and refer you to relevant primary and secondary materials. And, like other secondary sources, these tools can be helpful at the beginning of your research process. However, you may also find it helpful to go back to the generative AI tool once you've done some preliminary research on your issue. Given the nature of prompting, this knowledge will help you construct a better prompt which should produce a better response. You should verify every response and review and evaluate the sources cited. You can then use the information and sources provided, in conjunction with other various traditional legal research techniques, to expand on your research. Now, before we run some prompts through Protege and CoCounsel, let's talk about some of the limitations of these tools, and note that this is, of course, not an exhaustive list. You generally can't do a comprehensive document retrieval. For example, asking for all New York Court of Appeals cases on a particular issue. Protege and CoCounsel will provide some cases, but certainly not all. You can't replicate a search, so if you run the same search twice, you won't necessarily get the same response. Only certain resources on Westlaw and Lexis are available to CoCounsel and Protege. In other words, Protege and CoCounsel will not be consulting all available resources on Lexis and Westlaw when responding to your prompt. For example, as of April 2025, Protege includes primary law and some secondary sources, but CoCounsel only includes cases, statutes, and regulations, no secondary sources. Also be aware that the content available to Protege and CoCounsel will most likely continue to change in the future. And finally, this is not a one-stop shop. You will need to use other research methods and sources to complete your research. Relying on Protege or CoCounsel alone is not sufficient. So let's take a closer look at both CoCounsel and Protege. But first, let's start with a hypothetical. Your client was hit from behind and injured in a motor vehicle accident. The other driver had a blood alcohol level above the legal limit and was seen acting aggressively while drinking for hours at a local pub prior to the accident. Your task is to research whether your client has a cause of action against the pub that sold alcohol to the other driver. And the jurisdiction is New York. So here I am in Westlaw, and I'm going to access CoCounsel from the top. And I am going to put in my prompt. In New York, does someone injured by an intoxicated driver have a cause of action against the establishment that sold alcohol to the intoxicated driver? Now, I can select the research scale if I want, but given the nature of my prompt, CoCounsel will know that I'm conducting legal research. So I'm going to submit my prompt. Note that there was no place to select a jurisdiction, so I've just put the jurisdiction in my prompt here. And I am going to say, yes, I'm going to start AI-assisted research. I do not want to limit myself right now to the search and summarize practical law. Now, because CoCounsel does take a few minutes to respond, I ran this prompt earlier, and I'm going to switch tabs to that response. So as you can see, CoCounsel responds that, yes, the injured person could have a cause of action, and it references the Dram Shop Act, which is a new term of art for me, and the relevant statute in General Obligations Law, Section 11-101. And this law states that any person injured by an intoxicated person has a right of action against any person who unlawfully sold liquor to the intoxicated person, causing or contributing to the intoxication. Further down, we see reference to Alcoholic Beverage and Control Law, Section 65, which makes it unlawful to sell alcohol to any visibly intoxicated person. So after reading through the response, I may want to ask a more detailed follow-up question. Now, each platform, CoCounsel and Protege, limits the number of follow-up questions you can ask. I may want to follow up to get more insight into this visibly intoxicated standard. So what I'll do is I'll select the follow-up button here. And I will put my follow-up prompt here. What are the factors considered by New York courts when determining whether someone was visibly intoxicated under New York's Dram Shop Act and Alcoholic Beverage and Control Law, Section 65? Now again, because CoCounsel takes a few minutes to respond, I submitted this follow-up prompt as well, and it's just right below my initial prompt. And as you can see, it is referencing the General Obligations Law again and Alcoholic and Beverage Control Law, and going into more about this visibly intoxicated standard with citation to various cases. Below each response, you'll see this View All Cited Sources button. And if you select that, you will pull up the relevant resources and snippets list that lists the primary sources cited in the response. And if I collapse this list, I can see that there are additional sources listed here as well. Importantly, there are additional secondary sources listed. Now, these secondary sources were not used to formulate the response, but they are sources that CoCounsel decided may be of interest to you. So now, from my conversation, I now have this new term of art in Dram Shop that I could use possibly in keyword searches as I continue my research. I have more context and information on a possible Dram Shop cause of action. And I have relevant primary and secondary materials to review, specifically 2 statutes and many, many cases. So I will want to read the primary sources cited in these responses and use those sources to further my research. So if I go back to my response, if I want to get more information and take a look at this General Obligations Law, I can select the footnote associated with the General Obligations Law, and that will pull up a snippet of the statute. And if I select the section here, it will pull up in a new tab. And here I'll be able to read the entire statute, and then I can also use the notes of decisions to find additional cases that will further my research, or use KeyCite and the citing references to find additional cases that way as well. I can also use the Context and Analysis tab, which will provide me further insight into the statute and references to additional secondary sources as well. I can also access a case I thought was relevant and review the case. So if I go back to my response, let's see, I review this case. If I select the footnote relating to the case, again, I can read a little snippet. If I want to read the whole case, I can select the case there. And again, opening up a new tab, I can read the entire case. I can use the Citator KeyCite to find additional citing references, or I can use the headnotes of the case to find additional cases on my topic. So let's move over to Lexis and Protege. I will access Protege here on the left side menu. Now, in my previous example, I asked more of an open-ended question and got more specific by asking follow-up questions. If you're able, you can be more specific at the outset. See our discussion on prompting for more information on how to best construct your prompts. Now, if I had some prior knowledge of the Dram Shop Act, but wanted to know more about how the visibly intoxicated standard applied to my facts, I may want to ask Protege this question and put in this prompt. I'm going to put it in, I'm in the Ask section here under Ask a Legal Question. Does a high blood alcohol level and aggressive behavior constitute being visibly intoxicated under New York's Dram Shop Act, General Obligations Law, Section 11101, and Alcoholic Beverage Control Law, Section 65? Now here in Lexis, I can select my jurisdiction, so I'm going to select New York and apply that. I can also specify the content I want. I am going to say I want civil and criminal content, and I am not going to include unpublished or unreported decisions. And I will submit that prompt. Now again, because Lexis takes a few minutes to respond, I ran this prompt earlier, so I'm going to switch tabs to this response. And you can see it talks about how blood alcohol content alone is not sufficient. Then it goes on to talk about aggressive behavior. In the response, and if I scroll down even further, here I have a list of the content supporting the response. So a list of everything cited in the response is hyperlinked here. Further down, if I select View Related Material, this is pulling up even more cases, statutes, practical guidance that are relevant, and secondary sources as well. I'm going to press the back button here. Further down, Lexis provides suggested follow-up prompts and also follow-up tasks as well. Now, again, you'll want to review the sources cited and use those sources to further your research. For example, if I click on this New York Court of Appeals case here, this will pull up the entire case that I will want to review and read. I can then use the LexisNexis headnotes and shepherdize the document to find additional materials as well to further my research. If I want to go back to my Protege conversation, I can select the browser's back button, or I can select Protege here on the top right, and this will pull out a window that has my current conversation with Protege right here. Okay, so this was my prompt and the response. So if I want to ask a follow-up question, I can just ask that, put that in right here. So this has been a review of one way to use CoCounsel and Protege for legal research. For additional information or help, you can contact your reference librarians at lawreference@hofstra.edu or see the Gen AI materials made available by Lexis and Westlaw.